next few minutes, we're going to get an in-depth view of the subject area of sanctions and anti-money laundering. Now, with the rapidly evolving regulatory environment, it has never been a more important time for banks and financial institutions to understand the importance of their risk exposures. And joining us to discuss this is Tom Scampion. He's a partner at Deloitte UK. Ian Horobin is also with us. He is the CEO of Ormnicision. It's a consultancy in the area of sanctions and anti-money laundering. And Martin Pearson joins us. He's the Director of Group Services at RBS. Gentlemen, nice to have you with us. If I can start with you, Tom, first of all, tell us why this area has become so important.
Well, I think given the last 5 or 6 years have seen almost $2 billion of fines for banks for various transgressions in this, especially the sanctions area, it's somewhat focused the mind. So you've got a lot of fines. You've also got a very dynamic environment in the sense that the lists that people ask, the search for, are forever changing. And so with that change and with this sort of focus of the mind, you've certainly got a lot of industry focus.
Tell us about these lists and how it all works.
Sure, so depending on where you are, you either have national or supranational bodies issuing terms of individuals and entities that are prescribed. So you're not meant to take them on as customers nor to transact with them. So if you're here, it would be the OFSI list from Treasury. If you're globally, it's the United Nations list. In the US, there's the Office of Foreign Asset Control. There's various bodies, and depending on where you are present and the sort of business you do, you'll identify the lists that are relevant.
And Ian, obviously banks need to be prepared for this. You consult for a lot of financial institutions. Tell us about the gap as to what is there now and what really needs to be. How far are we from the ideal situation?
Well, I think it's it's just an ongoing challenge in terms of managing that change. Tom's talking about these lists, and I think it's just for the organisations to make sure that they're always on top of the game. I mean, the list that Tom talked about, typically we're looking at about 70 changes every year in those lists, and a large financial services organisation will be monitoring somewhere between 10 and 20 lists. So when you look at that, that means that they're going to be looking at instigating change processes on the sanctions front, perhaps 2 or 3 times a day in some instances. And when you combine these lists together, you can get combinations of about 40,000 individual terms that, as Tom said, they have to be screening customers on an onboarding process and also financial transactions as they're executing them.
But in terms of getting there, I don't think you're ever going to get there. This is a market that's going to continue to evolve as people who want to launder money get more sophisticated. So it's something that all financial organisations are going to have to continue to invest in.
And you're on the committee for SWIFT dealing with all of these issues. Tell us what has been the challenge for you in helping to create this new environment, this new model.
Yeah, so I sit on SWIFT's Global Sanctions Advisory Group. And the challenge really has been to find solutions that are cost effective for some of the smaller organisations. The infrastructure costs around AML are huge, and what we've been trying to do through that body at SWIFT is find some ways to bring either benchmarking solutions or sanctions utility solutions to the whole market rather than just the big global banks.
And you've been finding that as well, Ian. Tell us, can you give us some examples?
Yeah, I think over the last, if we go back 20 years, I think it was a different world. And I think what we've gone through over the last 15, 20 years is actually the introduction of technology within the organisations. And I think with any new technology, to start with, the price point is very high. And what's happened now is gone through the wave of actually introducing that technology, and now I think there's the pressure in terms of providing assurance that that technology works, but also lowering the price point. We're talking financial crime, and financial crime is not an area of competition, and quality controls should be available to all sizes of organisation. So I think that's one of the challenges that we're looking at pushing through now.
I think assurance is a great point as well, because people are moving from simply having the tools and to how can you feel confident those tools have been configured to do exactly what you want to do, and at a price that you can afford, because of course, although there's no exemptions, you are subject to the regulations no matter what. You can do this more efficiently if you configure the tools in a certain way. So there's certainly a drive towards the assurance around both effectiveness and assurance around efficiency.
But it's not just about the technology as well, it's about having the right people, having the right talent. I don't know, I would like to ask each of you this because, you know, I heard and read in some of the reports that I've seen on your session, you were the moderator of this session yesterday, where somebody talked about having the right SWAT team, and I think that's really the sort of culture one needs to go at it from.
Well, you know, there was some analysis that was done which said that roughly 90% of all the costs associated with sanctions compliance are to do with the manual inspection of cases once cases have been identified for investigation. And so, you know, that's a big challenge, it's a big cost, and also it's a big opportunity for people to say, well, how can we make that process well controlled and as efficient as possible?
And I think we have to look at, you know, about making that process effective and efficient as well, because I think one of the challenges is you know, as a person that's reviewing all of these cases, if you're looking at thousands of cases in a day and the opportunity of actually finding something that's real is so low, the chance of when you come across that case that you're going to miss it is high. And the problem there is we've got a control to mitigate a risk, and the control itself is a point of failure. So I think with the teams and the staffing and the technology, it's a case of striking a balance.
I wouldn't underestimate the culture piece, as you said. You know, having an appropriate technology solution or having appropriate processes in place aren't enough. It's got to be an end-to-end AML compliance program that's driven from the top of the house, that covers the back office, that covers the front office, that covers the regulatory functions. It has to be all-encompassing and driven from the top.
Okay, look ahead for me for the next year. I know this is a conversation that will keep happening year in, year out, but what do you see coming up over the next year in this area?
Well, I think there's going to be a thrust towards financial crime intelligence. I mean, we've talked about it quite a lot, but the idea of saying, instead of looking at these disciplines in separate silos, saying how can we gain intelligence across the fraud space, the sanctions space, anti-money laundering, FATCA, numerous other sort of financial crime initiatives, and we can learn from each, and we can be more efficient and effective by drawing on the education, if you like, from each of those silos. So I think we'll see that trend continuing, which has started, and hopefully to the benefit of all.
I'd agree with Tom there. I think, you know, there's a big drive towards instead of just talking about, you know, single solutions that solve every problem. I think what we do is we take a step back and we look at intelligence and about how we manage intelligence. And I think there's also an opportunity in the next wave that we're seeing within financial crime is about the assurance that these systems work, is actually using the assurance as a benefit to be able to formalise your risk and then to be able to optimise some processes.
And Martin sitting on the committee of SWIFT.
Yeah, I think there will definitely be a couple of SWIFT products into the market in early 2012 that can provide support to the global banks and to the, you know, some of the smaller regional banks as well. I think the other thing, you know, in the next 12 to 24 months we've just got to be aware of is, you know, some of the sanction challenges that lie ahead for the banks in the non-SWIFT space. So SWIFT is a, you know, huge part of our program, but we've got to look at the areas of that we are likely to be targeted by the money launderers, and sometimes that will be outside of SWIFT.
Well, I wish you all the best of luck with all of it. Martin, many thanks. Ian and Tom as well. We stay with us, everybody, because we have some interesting comments from. We will get as well some interesting comments later this week on the area of mobile payments. And now, earlier we caught up with James Wallace. He is the VP of Global Payments for IBM. He started by explaining the difference between mobile banking, mobile payments, and mobile commerce.
The way we look at mobile is we kind of break it into three dimensions. There's mobile banking that most people have, which is sort of basic banking services like internet banking on your phone. Mobile payments is really transactions. And then the third area is what we would call mobile commerce, which is more value-added services around things like, you know, mobile payments with coupons or with, you know, promotions, ways that banks and retailers try to differentiate the user experience. Payments is really hot in the emerging countries as a replacement for cash. That seems to be where a lot of the action is in Africa and Asia and South America. And then in the more developed economies like North America and Western Europe, it's more around, I think, the commerce side for consumer payments. Everyone is sort of knows that it's an important area. They're trying to figure out what's the best business model. Who do I partner with? If I'm a bank, do I partner with a telco? Do I partner with someone that can run the system like an IBM, for example? So there's lots and lots of different models emerging, and I think the challenge is trying to pick the winning horse. I think widespread adoption is a little way off. I think that for widespread adoption to take place, you need to have a critical mass of people with the capability to transact with their mobile devices. And you need to be able to offer the type of payment that they want. For the markets where the banks and the IT companies and the telcos are cooperating, I think those will be the ones that will adopt most quickly. And I think that's the formula. I think this is ultimately, we want everyone in the world to be connected to everyone else in the world. That's going to be good for everyone. But I think the other trend that we'll see is more on the business side. We're seeing now the trends where banks and other financial institutions are using mobile devices to enable their workforce to work in a slightly different way. So pushing apps down to your iPad so that you can go and have a discussion with a client in their home and have the full suite of products to discuss that you might have previously only discussed in the branch. So I think we'll see more adoption by the corporates. I think that would be my thing to keep an eye on for the next 12 months.
Well, that was James Wallace there from IBM speaking to us on Sibos TV earlier today. And mobile payments definitely going to be a hot topic later on in the week. Well, for those of you who were not able to get to the opening plenary yesterday, we have some comments now from Yawar Shah, the chairman of SWIFT. He raised with us some of the key points that he really wanted to get across for Sibos 2011. Here's what he had to say.
SWIFT basically does three things regularly. One, it is the intranet for banks, which is secure and reliable. Two, for 1 week at Sibos, it brings together thousands of bankers across the world to engage in a dialogue, and a dialogue full of sizzle and drama at times. But then regularly, across every continent, across many product lines, it brings the industry together to have regular routine conversations on how to solve problems cooperatively. The industry measures us on three major items. One is SWIFT reducing its prices to do business on SWIFT. And the answer there is SWIFT has reduced prices by 67% since 2006. The goalpost is another 30 to 50% over the next 4 years. And on top of that, we've given a rebate of 16% this year. Second scorecard item is SWIFT reliable and resilient? The answer is the 5 nines availability, still there. Resilience, very strong, state-of-the-art, industry best practice. And given that cyber threats are a major increasing force on any network, SWIFT is secure and protected. And thirdly, enabling banks to do business over the SWIFT network, to allow them to do their trade, payment securities in a reliable manner. We're getting very good feedback on that. The big thing that keeps me up at night is with all of SWIFT's success, will it always be constantly aggressive and vigilant, or will the success allow it to be a bit complacent? That is a normal thing that a chairman of the board worries about. And I'm happy to report people are very conscious of that. And there's one area I'd like to highlight. The large majority of SWIFT's current traffic comes out of North America and Western Europe. And yet when you look at the share of the world's GDP and where the growth is, it's actually in Asia, just generally speaking. So SWIFT's challenge is to make itself more and more relevant to Asia. One of the major events before Sibos even starts is to have the chairpersons of the national groups of the countries representing the banks at SWIFT gather together. It's an amazing sight to see all those flags. Basically, it's the United Nations of financial cooperation happening. And at the session Sunday morning, we talked about the strengths of SWIFT and the cooperative nature of it, where it was going, and asked for feedback from them on the next wave of challenges. Very interactive session. And you go from people from Uganda asking questions to people from France, to people from Brazil. It's just an incredible moment of global unity that you see together. And I would recommend for those who don't know the national chair people to go talk to them. They're very visible at Sibos.